Okay, welcome to this ProofSpace release webinar. My name is Nick Mason. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of ProofSpace. Thank you so much for being here, especially since this is going to be so much more than just a show and tell of new features. If we go to the next slide. So we'll start with a very brief intro to the agenda slide, please, Victor. Start with a very brief intro to self-sovereign identity and ProofSpace. Then we'll share some insights into how interoperability has shaped the design of our platform from the ground up. And we'll set this into context by explaining and then demoing the recently added features. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A, so I'll ask that you either type your questions into the chat as we go through the webinar, or just make a note elsewhere and we'll pick them up at the end of the call. All right, so let's dive in. For those who aren't familiar with self-sovereign identity, or SSI, it's helpful to think about it in the historical context of online identity management. So we have centralized identity management, which is where a single entity issues you a credential. You can use that credential in that one place. When you use it, the credential, the usage of that credential is tracked by the entity that issued it to you. And as you can deduce from those previous statements, the credential isn't owned by you. There's a model called federated identity management, which is most easily understood by thinking about how you might use your Gmail account to sign up to or log into services that are unrelated to Google. So it's an identity credential that's issued to you by a central entity. You can use it in many places across the internet, but your usage of that credential is always tracked by the entity that issued it to you. And of course, the credential isn't owned by you. So then comes decentralized identity. This is issued to you by a central entity, but once you've received it, you can use it anywhere that accepts it. And whenever you use it, it's not tracked by the entity that issued it to you. And most importantly of all, the credential is owned by you. So as the number of online identities we use expands from a few hundred to several thousand over the next 5 years, I guess the question is, would you prefer that these identities were owned and controlled by a major identity provider like Apple or Google, or by yourself? So enabling people and organizations to opt for the latter is really the raison d'etre of self-sovereign identity. If we go to the next slide. In any SSI workflow, there's an issuer, a holder, and a verifier. And the key differences with centralized and federated models are that the interactions between these stakeholders are peer-to-peer in a decentralized model. So there's no intermediary using, storing, or processing that data. A holder gets to choose with whom and when they share their credentials, and the verifier doesn't need to be integrated with the issuer's systems in order to verify that the credential is true. Let's go on. So how does ProofSpace fit into this? We're an identity hub wrapped with no-code tools. Being an identity hub means that services using ProofSpace support a library of protocols and credential types, which enable smooth transactions across identity networks and negates the challenges of making huge technical decisions now about really complex technologies that are rapidly evolving. It also means that services and people using ProofSpace are part of a network across which credentials can be seamlessly issued, shared, and verified. Wrapping this with no-code tools means you can build, integrate, and manage a sophisticated SSI workflow, all with no-code tooling. And in the demo of our latest updates, you'll see some of this tooling in action. We go on to the next slide. What this looks like on the user interface is organizations get a dashboard, which is a web-based dashboard, and it's a one-stop shop for building, integrating, and managing decentralized ID for your business. And people get a mobile application, which is a credential wallet plus a service discovery marketplace. The combination of these technologies is really like rocket fuel for ecosystems, which the majority of our customers are building, and across which they want credentials to be reusable. You'll hear more from Victor about this soon, but ecosystems are really hard to build and iterate from scratch using the available technologies on the market. So with ProofSpace, any member of an ecosystem can sign up and start issuing or verifying credentials in a matter of hours or days. So in summary, we help our partners to succeed by getting them to market fast and by future-proofing their use of SSI. Now, a big part of future-proofing is around getting interoperability right. So on that note, let's buckle in for a crash course on how ProofSpace designs for interoperability with our CTO, Viktor Radchenko.
Hi, everyone. I am very excited to be here. And before I start, I want to say that say many thanks to the team, which was working extremely hard, and despite the war that our motherland faced, we been able to release the product and constantly improve it. So thanks for the tech team, and thanks for the business team, which during last 3 years give us lots of opportunities to learn how SSI can be used and should be used among different countries, different continents, different customers, and we have a way to touch real users. So this experience give us the vision that I will share with you now. And what's with this slide? Yeah. So first slide is a bit boring, but we have to dive in a bit into the definitions and what is interoperability itself. And as researchers define it, it's a proficiency to communicate and the ability of service and system to exchange data in a meaningful and useful way. Important to understand and to mention that interoperability has different dimensions or aspects, and usually we spoke about technical interoperability. In case of SSI, is how the abstract verifier may verify credential from abstract issuer and how this can be solved. Beside that, we find out that other aspects of interoperability is quite important, and without solving this, we can't expect the interoperable communication to be happen. So when we look at the common software systems that communicate between each other, they usually solve technical, syntactical, and semantic aspects of interoperability to be able to transfer data from one system to another without losing the semantic of the data, and be able to translate the data into the formats that they use internally. When we spoke about SSI, we see that the direct integration is absent, but instead of the direct integration, we are getting a human, which bring us another aspect of interoperability. It's like a pragmatic aspect, because we have to rely on a human to transfer the data from one point to another. And it's extremely important that we should make all possible that the human will not fail in this communication. And beside pragmatic aspects, we may also think about business aspects, as SSI technology is quite fresh, and we have to convince people to use it, and they have to find arguments why they should use it and how it can be useful for them. So we need somehow to give a way for people to try SSI and to choose between different solutions, different identity networks, credentials types, and so on. And that's how we start thinking of interoperability, and came to the next key points that our platform is solving in one or another way. So first of all, let's consider an abstract verifier, which wants to get some credentials from the market. And I, as a verifier, should somehow understand what credentials are available, who issuing these credentials, why I should trust to that issuers, and well, what is the structure of the credentials. So to solve this, we provide a schema, a ledger of schemas, which our customers may see through their personal dashboards, and they may configure, use these schemas or credential definitions in the interactions that they configure with their users. If a new schema appears, it immediately is available for other services. They may generate credentials from it or request credential issued by that schema from the users. Then user discovery. We have to have a way to ask user to provide us some credentials and define how this interaction should happen. And for this, we have also on the dashboard a way to configure these interactions, configure, for example, selective disclosure or zero knowledge predicates for indie type credentials. In the app, we have a marketplace of the services, and a service lists the interaction that are available for the users. And inside interactions, user may understand why they do these interactions. And this is something that we'll speak about a bit later. Then communication, how the communication can happen, how we may satisfy privacy preserving of user communication. What could we do if the internet is unstable and the communication fails? So we have to have states for the events, and this is also available on the dashboard. We have events and the current state of the events. You may see, you may understand what's happening with the particular user. And also on the interaction editor, you may configure the initiation media, how the interaction can be triggered and what is required from the user. It is a button in the app or QR code on the reception or something else. Then, come on, okay. And just now we are coming to the verification part, which is extremely important and represents the technical part of the interoperability. And there are a couple of questions that we should answer, and we answer them through the dashboard configurations and different views on the data, on the state of verification, and what kind of credential types are used, identity networks, and so on. And the last, but not less important than others, is data processing. So when we receive a credential and somehow verify it, we should have a way to use this data in our own systems. And this could be a bit complicated. Good, we have schemas that identify the structure of the data, but then to integrate it with third parties, you have to have some tools, and we provide this integration entities on the dashboard, and you can easily use it and integrate with your third parties. So finally, this is the flow of verifier, and all these key points should be solved to help to achieve this interoperable communication. And for the issuer, we have a bit different flow, but the complexity is completely equal. I will not dive into the particular things, but we may discuss this during questions and answers. And then the most not predictable part of this communication is the human. And humans have to have a way to understand why he or she should share the data. What is the result? What is the goal of this sharing? What I will receive after? How I may communicate and reuse my credentials with the services. And this is where we invent, I believe, something really important in the SSI space is interactions, which consist of precondition and postcondition. And precondition represents the amount of credential that user is asked to share, and postcondition is something that user will receive back. So this gives like a good view on what's happening and understanding of a particular interaction. Then from our experience, interaction is not enough, because there can be long interactions, which consist of several small interactions, and we have to help user to pass through this way to achieve a final goal. And this is what we call goal-oriented flow, and you will see how we use it in the demo. So now, let's assume an issuer and a verifier which communicates through the user, and user is a courier of the data between them, wants to use SSI. And then they have to deal with all these SDKs, API, develop an app, synchronize on credential structure that they will be sharing between each other, and all these things. It's possible, but it's quite complicated, and the most complex things here is that two independent technical teams should be quite synchronized on these integration activities. And if you want to build an ecosystem, you may imagine the complexity is growing non-linearly, maybe even exponential. And but good, you have a ProofSpace, and we may solve all these issues with a no-code platform by providing a discovery layer for issuers, verifiers, and users. And this approach has been tested in a set of projects and successfully evolving, and we constantly improve the user experience, the new features, and so on. So, and now the new features. It was like, I guess, 4 months. We've been actively developing integration with Atala PRISM, and also adding some new features unrelated to Atala PRISM, but that were requested by our customers, and that's what we've got. So first of all, we are usually following the generic approach. I call it like a generic approach. If we have a new feature request, I always ask team to develop it in a generic way so it can be reusable with other customer services and in other cases. So to integrate Atala PRISM, we understood that our previous webhook functionality is not enough, and to support complex integration and like delayed issuing of the credentials, because credentials, the issuing starts on the dashboard, then data goes to the Atala PRISM gateway. We are waiting for the publishing a transaction to Cardano blockchain, then goes back and issuing this credential to a user. So to develop this, we decide to have an integration entity, which allow us more complex and interesting flows, integrating interactions with third parties. You may trigger webhooks on different interaction events, and this is what we use now for integrating third parties. Interesting that this approach will allow us to do integration with different third parties. For example, you may integrate Slack or Google Docs with the ProofSpace dashboard, and also you may publish the integration to the network so other services may reuse it. And an example of this integration is a Atala PRISM gateway, which any service can use in any interactions just by adding the integration to the interaction. It automatically adds required credentials that should be provided by user to be able to work with this interaction. And this, in particular, this is Atala PRISM did, and it immediately appears in the app. So that's how we integrate Atala PRISM credentials and DIDs. Deep links and QR codes and to trigger interactions. This is really important because we start to integrate with different Web3 services and Web2 as well, but the user should have a way to, so the service should have a way to easily integrate triggering of the interaction in the ProofSpace app, and this can happen in the third-party app or on the site, and the site should act differently depending on from what kind of browser it was open. So on the mobile browser, we will see a button with deep link. On the desktop, we'll see a QR code. And this is just one integration, and we are providing automatically generated code for the site or for the app that can be used easily. Optional storing, we are also always debating how to call this feature, but it's about that if we want to really have privacy and security for the user data, we may set the interaction to not store the data or credential that are received or issued during this interaction. So the interaction complete and everything is clean up, but the user will receive a credential which then can be used for verification in this or other services. And interesting that this feature came from one project where community is fighting against totalitarian regimes, and maybe it will become public soon. But they require this. Hidden services is something that follows our approach to give the most simple way for the services to start building, to play with SSI, and like we know competitors do this, they have a test network or not competitors, well, but other SSI solutions, all our partners. They provide a test network, and then you have to move your solution to the production or to the main net. But we think that everything should happen in the main net. So you register, you get your service, you can start building POC. The services will not be visible in the service list on the marketplace, but your trusted user may activate it by scanning a special service QR code. Another feature that help us to follow this approach is deprecation of schemas and credential definition that are not used already or created incorrectly or whatever. So services may clean up some garbage, and this helps us to keep the network clean and useful for the community of the services. And the last, I guess, is that we are now on production. We have an OnFIDO KYC sandbox. The OnFIDO is a provider, as well-known, world-known provider of identity verification solution, and we integrate the SDK into the app, and we have this sandbox on the production. So you may start playing with credentials that are generated from the passport verification process and use it in your flows. You may use general knowledge proofs, selective disclosure for this kind of credentials, and you will see this in the demo as well. So our future plans are, we want to extend the amount of use cases that we can support with the platform. And that's why we are moving forward in the direction how verifiable credentials can work with smart contracts, with tokens, and crypto wallets. And also interoperability, as we became an identity hub, we want to integrate more identity networks, credential types, SSI solutions that want to explore and use our communication and discovery layer, and to provide more usability for the customers, for the users, etc. And our strategic goal, of course, is a transition to the open protocol and fully decentralized solution in the future, and we are constantly thinking and have plans how to do this, but this is something that will happen a bit later. So now the demo, and here's our video, and I record it and cut some time that used for publishing to the blockchain. So enjoy. On the left, you may see our ProofSpace demo dashboard with the listed interactions. On the right, you may see the screen of our app. And as I mentioned before, user is able to discover the services that are available in the network. And for example, if a service is in a hidden mode,
lost the audio, Victor.
Now visible in the app, and it lists all the interaction that have been configured on the dashboard. For this particular demo, we assume we have an organization which wants their members to be able to SSI OAuth to some secret area, and they should do this with the first interaction. Let's see what's inside. The interaction requires user to provide OAuth user code, which will be fetched from the QR code and which will identify the session. Also, our organization wants user to provide access pass, which we don't have yet. The organization wants to get Atala PRISM DID, which is generated inside the app and belongs to the user, to be able to verify organization access pass, which has Atala PRISM representation. How user may achieve this? It's obvious that we have to request the organization access pass through another interaction, but this interaction requires us to provide a verified passport, which we don't have yet. And this verified passport is provided by another service, which is on FIDO ID verification sandbox. And we may jump there and see that to get the passport on FIDO ID verification sandbox wants us to provide application ID, which is something that identify user in this service and give him or her ability to verify different documents. It's kind of backward reachability when we jump from the goal to the initial states or initial condition that should be done by the user, and it brings a bit of sense how the user may understand what is required. But as I mentioned previously, we have this goal-oriented flows, which services may use, and this can be easily activated by activating the custom profile, which we have here, and I press enable. Done, and in a few seconds you'll see how the UI of this ProofSpace demo service will change. Here it is. Now we have a goal-oriented flow, which starts from ID verification, which is required. And then we have to onboard organization to be able to perform the SSI OAuth interaction. And interaction onboarding and SSI OAuth, they are not active currently because we first have to verify our ID. So let's do this. And I use a passport example from the network. Let's scan it with OnFIDO SDK. All right. Now we are able to submit a photo. Here it is. We've got a verified passport. Well, it's generated randomly as it is on FIDO sandbox, but the real user experience will be the same. And you may see that the profile of the service changed, and now we are in another state where we are able to onboard to organization. And here the interaction. Again, we provide verified passport. It's important to see that this particular interaction requires only document issuing country and a predicate that this person born after 1989, 3rd of August. So we agree to share the credentials. We press proceed. Let's see what's in our dashboard. We are pending to receive organization access pass. A new event appeared on the dashboard, and we may review the credentials that were received from a user and issue access pass, which contains pass ID and 2 technical attributes which are required for Atala PRISM verification. We press issue, and here we have to wait a bit because publishing the transaction to the blockchain takes around 2-3 minutes. And here we are. Finally, organization access pass in. We can see that we have a pass ID, credential issue date, PRISM signature, and PRISM output 3 inside. Now the overall UI of the service changed, and the only one interaction that remains, and we can do it is with app scanner or native scanner. And immediately, if we do the interaction, I can see that all pseudocode is pre-filled, that Atala PRISM data is here, and the organization access pass is required. So I press proceed, and I have successfully authorized. Let's summarize. During this flow, a user received verified passport from one service, and this passport has been issued as ProofSpace Indy credential. Then another service requests selective disclosure and predicates from this ProofSpace Indy credentials, and as a result issued Atala PRISM credential. And a third interaction which happens is SSI allows when organization requests access pass with Atala PRISM credential and able to verify it in the Cardano blockchain. Thanks for watching. All right, that's it. And not all features were shown, but guys said that we'll have then 2 long demo, so we may discuss this during your question and answers. Thanks for your attention, and let's jump to the questions.
So quick point, a housekeeping note on questions. Let's do the raise a hand. Well done, Tim. Let's raise a hand if you're happy to come off, show your video, come off mute and fire away. And if you don't want to do that, then tap a question into the chat and we can address them as they come in. So Tim, over to you.
Okay, this will be a slightly technical question, but I mean, I guess when I think of self-sovereign identity, I think of a very open system. So my question is like, how do you sort of balance the compromise? Like on the one hand, if somebody wants to verify somebody else's credential, they didn't necessarily want them to have to download an app because that's extra work. If I send my resume to somebody with a credential, I don't want to necessarily say, oh, you want to make sure it's me, then download an app and then verify, because then the guy may say, well, next resume, for instance. So I think key to that, the technical part of that is like when we have private data, particularly, let's say an external resource, that with a resource link from the DID, then where is actually the private key that encrypts that private data? So like if you take, for instance, the information on the driver's license, maybe you have the user's name, their address, whatever. You don't want to put that in a public domain. So you want to encrypt that, but then key ownership of that private key is really kind of, at least for me, what sort of makes that differentiate between a decentralized DID-based SSI system and a more traditional system. So can you go over a little bit like how you manage that private key, the encryption process? What if the document changes and changes hands and it has to be encrypted by somebody else? Yeah, that's my question. Sorry, it was a little long.
Thanks for it. We provide an app, and user is under control of own private and public keys for the PRISM and Indy DIDs. They are generated from a mnemonic phrase, so it can be portable to another instance of our app or any other. So you own your DIDs and your private keys. On the service side, which use our dashboard, and they may choose whether to use a cloud solution or on-prem installation. They are owning their DIDs and keys as well. The public keys of the services are published in the blockchain, so the verifiers can find them during the verification. And yeah, that's how it is. We don't publish actual personal information into the blockchain. The Atala PRISM publish hash of the credential to be able to revoke it in the future, but all the signed credential stays in the user's app and can be reused with different services. That's how it's achieved.
Okay, I guess a quick follow-up. So do you have a repository, a verifiable repository? For instance, if you have external data, it's non-trivial data. Maybe somebody has a large PDF or a photo scan of an official document. Can you put that, do you have access to an external repository? And as far as the keys, when you say the user owns his keys, does that mean that the keys still stay stored in your wallet? And in that case, encryption of data then would have to be some API on that wallet that says encrypt, which has certain throughput limitations. So I think that's just a general sort of challenge that DID has. How do you prevent? Where do you store your keys, and wherever your private key is stored? How do you access it in order to encrypt the data without compromise?
Well, actually, in our current solution, we have B2C solution. When services issues and sign the credential to the users, they communicate securely, and this communication is encrypted with the connection DIDs that are unique for each service with which you interact. But all these connection DIDs, they are related to the actual wallet, to the identity, and that's how we may prove that this credential that was issued to this connection DID belong to the user, which interact with other service through other connection DID. Regarding the storage, the secret storage of the big files, we currently don't have this. We actually developed the system based on the request and feature request from our customers, but we have some interesting discussions with the solutions that run kind of decentralized databases or credential-based databases, and possibly it can become an interesting collaboration on how we may add another option for our customers and users to store the verifiable data and use it in the interactions.
I see. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Alison, thanks for waiting patiently with your hand up. Please dive in.
Thanks, and congratulations. And it's really exciting milestone. Well done with the release and great presentation. You went over this in the presentation and the demo, but I wondered if you could just cover it again. I'm really interested in the on-FIDO identity document integration. So where is the, sort of following up on Tim's point, where is the personal data stored if I upload my driver's license or my passport to be verified? And then did I understand correctly that you can do selective disclosure once that driver's license or that identity document has been verified? So to prove something from that document to another service without sharing the data?
Yes, so on-FIDO is a Web2 service that is used in Pioneer, for example. Am I right, Nick? Like you have to pass the KYC before you can receive payments. So they are quite robust in this area. They make photo of your, you give them the document photo, you give them the selfie or even a video, how you turn your head. They do this verification on their side. They keep this data for some time. They may also provide if the ID is suspicious, they may somehow notify the service which use their solution. What we do, we have ProofSpace agent which sits between on-FIDO and user app. And we don't store the personal data, but we get the call from the on-FIDO that verification passed. Then we put this data into verifiable credential and issue it to the user. After this, user own this verifiable ID. The trust came from on-FIDO, and it can be used with other services. Actually, may request selective disclosure of zero knowledge predicates based on the verified ID. What is interesting here that seems it's a way how the trust can be dilute from the central authorities to the services that may then trust each other. So like you have a passport, everybody rely on the passport, but one service may require passport and then issue you back another KYC, anonymous KYC, let's say, and the third service may trust the second one and don't ask for your passport data then. So it's a way how the trust can be decentralized, actually.
If I can add briefly to that, the other aspects of the on-FIDO integration are that if a ProofSpace customer wants to have an on-FIDO KYC process as part of their interaction, they can create a child account in on-FIDO, and within that child account, it's all fully configurable by the ProofSpace customer. So they can set, for example, the period of time for which that data is retained. And the shortest I think that on-FIDO offer is 24 hours. So they're actually one of the reasons that we wanted to work with them is they actually offer pretty impressive standards in terms of how we may help our more privacy-oriented customers to bridge this Web 2 to Web 3 identity verification process.
That's really interesting. So the 24-hour retention would be even on the on-FIDO. Am I saying that right? On FIDO side? Yeah.
So it's completely up to the customer as to how they process that data and the purpose for which they use the on-FIDO SDK. So if they're a regulated entity and they have requirements for data retention, then they'll comply with those policies by configuring their on-FIDO child account accordingly.
That's interesting. Thank you.
So how do you handle the cost of the transaction, or the FIDO maybe transaction? Is on the platform, or how you pay that?
That's via the on FIDO account. Yeah. So we take care of that for the customers, but we integrate the pricing for on FIDO identity checks into the billing processes for our customers.
Okay, good.
Rohan, please fire away.
Yeah, hi Nick. First of all, yeah, really great presentation. Really excited about what you guys have achieved. My question was about some stuff that you mentioned about integration. And the question is, suppose there's a situation where there's a bunch of users who have been issued, for example, Atala PRISM credentials in a separate environment. And then a service wants to be able to use those credentials through ProofSpace. Is there a way to do that?
Yes, and we are working on the proposal which aim to develop or propose to the community a way to define schemas for the Atala PRISM credentials. As you may see, we operate with the credentials as some abstract things, and before receiving them, we already know what to expect inside. And this is syntactical and semantic aspects of interoperability, which should be covered before this cross solution verification and issuing can be done. So yes, this is something we want to propose, and we call everybody who is interested in this to develop together and this proposal for schemas. Yes.
Okay.
I see Ruslan, who's our solution architect and one of the senior engineers on our team. He's raised his hand. He might want to address that comment as well.
Yes, it's a small comment, maybe two comments. First, we need a second party in the ecosystem. And actually exist two things how something will grow. It is grow when users have a need and they build solutions, or it is grow because it's built from top to down. And all history says that the first way works and the second way works so-so. So we have other party, and we want to have other party. It is one part. Since how it is done technically, I think that if we will have adopted standard, for example, the core media, then we will implement one and still trying, but I doesn't expect this that you can use such solution now without participating in building it. So if you want to use this, you should participate in building. That's all.
All right.
Right. Standards came from the spontaneous orders and experiments, not from the regulations, usually.
Thanks, Rohan. Rodo, over to you.
Yeah, so in the same line of interoperability, so suppose that I want to build a verifier that can verify ProofSpace issued credential. So can I do that? There's a way to communicate with a ProofSpace holder, and there's a way for me to look at the indie network to see the public keys and verify all the stuff, or is it something for later?
Well, that's it's the same that Ruslan mentioned. We run through the customers' requests, and our indie network currently don't provide this, but it's just because we don't have enough time to finish these things. But potentially, yes, it could be opened and should be opened. And we also support JSON-LD format, which can be issued from the dashboard, and user may show the QR code, huge QR code of this credential. So yes, we are not like thinking about closed solution. We constantly thinking how maximum to decentralize it and to make it open, but everything depends on the customer needs. That's our approach. We believe that it will bring us to the success. So yeah, let's discuss and work together. If you guys will come with a case, with your communication layer, with your indie / Prism credentials. Well, the credentials itself are very similar or actually the same, but the question is how the services can discover each other, how they may communicate, how this communication can be handled between different solutions. And as we are now Identity Hub, this is something we want to resolve for as many SSI solutions as possible.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rio. I'm not sure who was first out of Tim and Mark, but perhaps you could.
Mark.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, congratulations on the release, by the way. It's a far cry from the last time I saw it. It's a really good job, guys. Yeah, Nick, you probably know I'm developing some healthcare apps for healthcare focused app, really. And in the spirit of no code development, I'm actually building my app on the Bubble platform, as well as 2 million people in there from the looks of it. I was just wondering really whether you'd be open to developing a plugin for this platform, you know, not just for my use, but potentially for other people.
Always happy to consider everything that makes sense. I don't know the platform, Mark, but if you ping me the link, we'll check it out. And if there's a good reason to develop a plugin, then that would be a great thing to do. Thanks for the suggestion.
I'll do that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I hope your project is coming on as well. It's a really important one.
Great stuff. Thanks.
And Tim, over to you.
Yeah. So a big part of the DID specifications is around trust graphs. So, and that can be very important in certain applications, such as when you're in an area of the world where you don't have IDs, and then somebody's ID becomes almost a fuzzy concept of how many people issue credentials. So my question is, like, if you want to build trust graphs, particularly in your verifiable presentation, how do you actually provide the rules or the order so that you don't have, so you preserve group privacy or herd privacy, as they call it? And then usually there's one central issuer of credentials, some trusted authority that then has issues the first identity, and then other people may, or anybody in the system in some cases, may issue their credential. So if you're, let's say, just somebody coming on to the bank, starting getting loans and in microloans, then, you know, different banks may issue credentials, saying that they know you and trust you. So there almost becomes a governance of who is the trust giver. So do you have a strategy to have to either manage the trust graph or B, have the delegate certain people who are, or certain entities that are to be trust givers or trusted trust givers.
Right. So we are not like, we want to give a full freedom for the services owners as much as possible to define the trust registries, and this is another Catalyst project proposal that is funded and currently in the development. So there will be a smart contract linked to the schema, and only so anyone can issue on the schemas, but the verification process may assume checking that the issuer is in the trust registry, and this is how communities may build. Communities or businesses may build their trust systems. From one hand, from another hand, we are not restricting anybody from any experiments. The only one reason why we have to keep onboarding governments on our hand is because we have a huge centralization on the market side and store side, and our experience in the healthcare reflect that if the SSI app wants to work with personal health data, especially in USA, it should pass significant reviews on the markets. So, like, if it will be free for all to run services without review, then it may harm the apps, and all will lose the way to communicate. But we also thinking how in the future the community may decide which services may be listed publicly in the app, and somehow regulate this process. So will not be the only one who decide now.
Okay. And have you thought about the herd privacy? Like, I'm thinking, like, if somebody has a degree issued from a university and then they want to check that the university is legitimate, then there may be a provost at the university, and typically there would be, and then you want to look into who that individual is, who he's trusted. But it would be very easy to accidentally reveal information that individual considered private, like his name and his address or phone. So building a graph without accidentally bringing in data that is private data for one of the parties.
So the user give the final approval on sharing the data, and it's up to the user. We can't protect everyone from any data leaking, but at least user may review what he or she is sharing and make a decision regarding how one verifier may verify the trusted the issuer. It's DIDs made for this, and DID documents that may contain information about the service and public information about the university, and this can be somehow checked, etc., etc.
So if you say that in this scenario, like the provost may actually then issue a kind of verifiable presentation, which could be used by somebody who was using them in a trust graph.
No, kind of. They may. We also in our plans currently we do B2C interactions, which are the most like user and services, but we want also to support B2B, service with service. So service may issue something to another service, and also C2C, when user may issue credential that to each other through the community agent or directly. And this is something that is under research.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm just aware that we've tipped the top of the hour. We did say that the agenda was going to run from 3 till 4 UTC, and we'd stick around for a half an hour if anyone wants to carry on the conversation. So if there are people that need to drop off, a huge thank you from all of our team for attending. Hopefully you love what you saw today, and if you have any questions and want to start building your SSI workflows with ProofSpace, then please do get in touch with us. We'll share our link tree in the chat now, and you know, my email is nick@proofspace.id, so that's a really easy one. So if you do need to drop off, again, thank you for joining. If you want to stick around for a chat, we'll be here.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Nishka.
Thanks, everyone.
So let's see who the hardcore are. Great questions, Tim. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, it's an interesting space.
So Nick, one question. I had to jump to the car, but you mentioned that there are plans to integrate with other SSI networks. Do you have some in mind for the next one, as you generate the PRISM?
The more I say this, the more people ask me. I'm afraid it's a very political response. We are still reviewing the next moves. We have we have limited capacity, and so a definite need to prioritize which networks we move to next. As soon as we have a decision, our pioneers, Astros community, will be among the first to find out. Thanks for pressing me.
Just maybe it's just looking where the market goes and what are the other options. So it's hard to tell now, right?
Right. Definitely. I mean, if you have insights, recommendations, I'm always open to hearing.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
I'm curious, just to follow up on that, to learn more about the market. How many options are there that you might review?
It's a pretty long list of SSI protocols. There's 12.
Is it really?
There's 12 credential types that I know of in circulation. I mean, there's a long list of SSI protocols. There's a fairly short list of ones that we might want to prioritize. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I realized I'm so ingrained in the Cardano community. I don't know that much about what else is even out there.
Well, frankly, so are we at the moment.
Well, that's good.
And we definitely plan to be for the long run. So we just need to find the capacity to look into it. I think what the integration of PRISM has done is it's kind of validated the importance of us continuing that path and doing it in more places. I think if you can have if you can have a library of options for services to select from, and where those services may come from, different blockchain platforms, they may come from communities that are entirely unrelated to any blockchain platform, and you give them the option to select from those credential types, while also not excluding the possibility that they can verify credentials from other networks and other credential types, then I think that's a really, really powerful offering when we think about things like the the goals of cross-chain collaboration, cross-chain commerce. So we have every intention of getting there, but we are really doubling down on the Cardano community at the moment, and so far that's been brilliant. We've loved every second of it. Robert, you've got your hand raised.
I have. I've got sort of daft dad question really, but I'd love to have a couple of user cases that are current. No names, obviously, but the sorts of people that you're currently dealing with, or something that's in the pipeline, and how they pay for it. If you don't want to answer this,
no, those are.
I'll answer another time.
I'm more than happy to answer those questions. That gives me a chance to shout about our partners.
Great.
For the first question, I'd like to actually just cue in Alison, who is actively piloting at the moment. And for the second question, how they pay, it's a monthly subscription based on the volume of interactions that they're processing as a service. So I can handle that one fairly quickly, and happy to go into the pricing in a bit more detail. But Alison, on the use case, fire away, and then I can, run through a list of 15, 20 other use cases if we want to.
Yeah, well, thanks, Nick, for the opportunity. I love having the chance to talk about the use case that we're working on together. So I don't know how familiar you are with Cardano or with Catalyst, which is Cardano's decentralized innovation fund. So the way Catalyst works, it's dispersing funds that come from the Cardano blockchain treasury, which is basically a tax on Cardano users. And the way those funds are distributed is that anyone in the world can apply for a grant. Anyone in the world can serve as a grant reviewer. There's then a smaller pool of people who review the reviews, and the final rankings are published, and anyone who holds at least 500 ADA can vote on the results, and the top voted projects are allocated funds from the Cardano treasury. And it's an amazing process. It's hugely decentralized, it's very global, and it also suffers from a lot of problems because it is so radically open. So the use case that we're working on is to require the proposal assessors to go through a brief virtual online onboarding course to ensure they have the minimum skills needed to do the job of assessing grant proposals, and also to prove that they're human and one person. Once they finish that course, using ProofSpace amazing technology, we'll issue them a verifiable credential that they can hold in their ProofSpace wallet, and then they'll use that credential to verify that they've taken the course when they register to start the review writing process. I came up with this idea and then met ProofSpace in the process of applying for funds from Catalyst to support this project, and it's just been a really exciting partnership to be able to use the ProofSpace tools and very, very easily bring this project to life, at least from the technology standpoint, because I'm a finance person and a banker by background, not a coder. So that's my use case.
Fascinating, Alison. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. And it's not this, that's not trivial. Through Catalyst, there will probably be somewhere in the region of 60 million ADA distributed to projects globally this year. And those projects will probably get voted on somewhere between 1 and 2 million times. So this is a really, when we think about the numbers behind it, that's an incredibly important solution that Alison's developing. In the kind of stepping out of the Web3, oh, sorry, go ahead, Alison.
No, sorry, thank you, Nick. That's an incredibly important point. I should have talked about the magnitude of Catalyst. And one other number that I'll mention is the treasury itself holds, depending on the value of ADA, but at one point it was as much as $1 billion worth of ADA. Now I think it's $500 or $600 million worth of ADA, but it's a huge amount of money. So allocating it responsibly is an important task.
Just to highlight a couple of other use cases, I suppose one which is not so much in the world of Web3 and perhaps more accessible in that way. It's looking at the hospitality sector and equipping travelers with an identity credential that they can use repeatedly across travel booking and travel check-in and travel related interactions. So we're working with a company called eRevMax, which operates one of the biggest booking engines in the world, which is called Rate Tiger. They work with more than 9,000 hotels across 100 countries globally. And for Rate Tiger to be able to have a QR code displayed on their booking engine, which processes the verifiable credential containing the traveler identity, which can include multiple levels of information, everything from like the basic stuff, your name, your address, your email, to your travel preferences, your room preferences, all these kinds of things. That is a powerful source of data, not only for their booking APIs, but also for the hotels that they're working with downstream. And we can also tie that into the full hospitality journey by working with the hotels to put a QR code on the reception desk. So all you have to do is walk in, scan that QR code, it'll share your booking confirmation, and it'll issue you, potentially we even get to the point where upon completion of check-in, you get issued your room key directly to your credential wallet. So there's an exciting flow that we're actually, I think we finished part of the integration this morning with Rate Tiger. And so we should be able to see a pilot of that coming up pretty soon. Sorry, overexcited spiel there on use cases. So Ahmed, I'm going to ask that you come in before Tim. Tim, sorry, I know you've asked a few questions already, so I'm going to bring someone before you. Thank you. Ahmed, are you there?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you now.
Hi. Okay, so I'm gonna be really quick because I know that we're almost over the time. So, guys, to be honest, I'm very, very, very proud of what you have achieved using our technology. As someone who's been an IOG for not that long, and I'm seeing that what I'm working on and how people are working with and what you have achieved so far, it's just amazing. And I just had to say, because we really did a really good job, and I'm really proud of what you achieved, and I'm really, really excited of what's coming on in the next couple of months of what you're going to achieve, and with all the other Astros team members and all of it's very lovely, and I'm very, very excited to what's going to happen next.
Well, that means the world. You've been amazing in your support for us, and we're super proud to have one of, if not the first, native iOS implementations completed, and wouldn't have been able to do it without your support. So thank you very much.
You're more than welcome, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Tim.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the history of the DID specification and SSI, there's a distinct like anti-corporate flavor of like, we're going to reclaim our data. You know, I think famously Facebook, Google, Amazon tried very hard to stop the passing of the specifications. So yeah, my question is because I want to own my data. So if I have medical records, I don't want to know it was on somebody else's server and trust that they deleted it. That's happened before, right? I want to, when I originate the data, I want to encrypt it with my key. I want to keep it in my trusted repository after it's been encrypted. So do you find, since you're sort of starting at the corporate side, like how can you use self-sovereign identity from your corporate partners? How do you find they're amenable to this? Is there a general feeling in the corporate world now that, hey, people want their identity, we're not going to fight it? How did you discover this, that basically there's an entry from the not the rebel, I'm going to own my own data, but from the company that actually might be the one who wants to own your data?
This is a brilliant question, and not necessarily one that's answered in a pithy one-liner, I'm afraid. I think it's very unhelpful to try and respond to this by putting all corporations into one bracket. So the difference between talking to companies that we're working to in the Web3 world and between companies we're working to in the world of Web2 is naturally enormous when it comes to the appetite to use decentralized ID, because privacy is a value proposition. And privacy isn't necessarily just a functional requirement or a pain in the ass for the risk committee. It's a value proposition without which they will not be able to continue to grow their customer base. So it's a core requirement. And for ProofSpace's conversations, it is, let's say, smoother onboarding customers from the world of Web3 than it is for the world of Web2. For all customers, there is a pretty compelling value proposition around which there is increasing evidence that you either can make more money or save money by using decentralized identity. And when the conversation, when the narrative about integrating fairly novel technologies into big traditional enterprises starts to make a case for significant cost savings, partly because of the way that these companies are handling privacy, but also in the way that they're developing their ecosystems and engaging customers in the brave new world, you see that it becomes much less about a fear of some notionally libertarian technology, and much more about the impact that this technology can have on my business. Can it improve how I engage with customers? Can it enhance my processes, bringing efficiencies either to the technology that I'm using, the cost of using that technology, or to how my teams are structured and the way that they're engaging with customers. So we're seeing, 3 years ago when we started doing enterprise sales and we were talking to banks and telecommunications companies in Africa, and then 2 years ago when we were talking to health organizations in the US, clinical laboratories and vaccine manufacturers and so on. The difference between, I think, the conversations that we were having then and some of the conversations that we're having now is partly that privacy is being recognized as a value proposition. And I was just going across the Westway in London recently, and Samsung have a billboard on the busiest road in London advertising privacy as the main reason to buy a Samsung phone. So that's actually a really big moment for the privacy industry. But it's also so much more now about how we compete with the incumbent technologies. Our ability to make that argument is improving with every customer that we work with. So hopefully that went some way to answering your question.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Do you feel pressure, like for the credential, like let's say the travel company, that this would be strategic information for the company, or are they just willing to say like, okay, either there isn't a significant data, or we feel this is a good way to compete by allowing this data to become publicly viewable even by our competitors?
Yes, okay, I kind of see the question. In any self-sovereign identity interaction, when you're sharing the data with a third party, that third party receives the data and stores it according to the privacy policy that they operate. That creates a natural risk in any data sharing scenario. We've provided the tools in the platform so that that data doesn't have to be retained. We've also provided the tools so that it can be integrated into their third parties so that it is fully compliant with whatever policies they operate. We can't control how third parties use the data, but if self-sovereign identity companies are going to be asked to start policing compliance to GDPR and enforcement of data subject access requests, then I think we're being pushed in a direction that kind of it judges the industry by a because we're on the avant-garde of privacy, there is an expectation that there may be an expectation that we enforce standards of privacy upon users of self-sovereign identity that haven't necessarily upgraded to that extent yet. So I think there is always going to be this tension as we are building the bridges between Web 2 and Web 3, and there is always going to be that tension. The specific integration that you mentioned with eRev Max and the Rate Tiger booking engine, the basket of credentials that are being requested is quite limited. The credentials that are requested can be selectively minimized, and data minimization is a practice formalized in GDPR rules. So at least European entities or companies transacting with European customers should minimize the data that they're collecting by design, and we allow for that design to be executed. The strategic thing there is more that there are tons of intermediaries in the travel market, and a hotel is probably having 25% of their revenue shaved off before they even meet the customer in their reception. Self-sovereign identity, it is going to be a long road, but self-sovereign identity, and part of our plans for the partnership with eRev Max, is to disrupt that rather disappointing status quo. That means that it's more expensive for us to travel as well.
Yeah, right. It's a compromise. Everything's a compromise.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. That's awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Yeah, Rodo, thanks for joining. Naturally, we'll keep in contact.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Alison.
I wanted to follow up quickly on Tim's point, because I have a hypothesis coming from being in the banking industry, and I was a corporate banker at a very large bank, and keeping customer personal data private was a huge headache. And a lot of times I had to KYC my customers, and I didn't want their passports and data floating around. And I saw that. I was a corporate banker, so I saw that with many of my bank clients as well. So my hypothesis, and I look forward to testing this as I go along here, but is that those companies may pay for a solution that doesn't actually require them to spend huge amounts of money storing and keeping customer data private when they don't actually need that data. And because not only do they have to pay huge amounts of money to store customer information that's not critical for the banking relationship, but's required for KYC purposes, but then the reputation risk when there are those big hacks. I mean, if you think about the Equifax data breach and all of the damage that caused, if there's a way to reduce the amount of customer data that needs to be stored, I not only think companies would welcome that, but would pay for it. And so, coming back to Robert's question about how do you pay for this, that's one of the kind of, like I said, it's a hypothesis, an early thought around how to build a business model in this industry, is to refunnel those costs around securing data and keeping it huge, warehouses of data within large companies, and having them pay for SSI technology that allows them to get the same result, but without having to actually keep and store the data. It's a hypothesis.
I mean, to fire it back to you, Alison, are you saying that there is a substantial difference between the data that is collected and required from a KYC perspective and the actual full basket of data, that some of which is collected sort of arbitrarily? Is that what you're saying, or you're saying that they don't need to be, you're saying that you could separate, but you could create a separation between the data that's collected for KYC and the data that's used for otherwise general banking purposes?
Exactly. Because, I mean, just to take a corporate example, and that's why I was asking about the OnFido technology. I may need to verify the identity of a CFO, but that or she is not banking with me, so I don't need to store all of their identity in the same way. So if there was a way to authenticate who they are online without me having to keep those passport or driver's license document in my, in the bank's database, that would be a really, reduction of risk and a better customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm sure that CFO is asking you questions about how the data is stored and processed. And at some point, they're going to do a data subject access request, which creates an operational burden.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Although I don't think that concept exists in the US. I could be wrong about that.
Well, it does definitely in California. I'm not sure about anywhere else.
Oh, does it really?
If that is a use case that banks are interested in, as you well know, we can support it, and we'd be happy to prepare a joint presentation if there's someone who would lend us their ear.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. This is not a near-term opportunity, but it's something that's definitely on my radar. So don't worry, I'll keep you posted.
Thanks. Pete, did you want to jump in there?
I was just saying that it's not just California. I believe there's a few states that do. But yeah, no, I agree 100% with what Allison was saying. Before I got into technical writing at the bank that I worked for, I was the payments guy who did all of the payments for one of the largest mortgage companies in the US. And it's amazing how much information I had access to. I could see people's account numbers with very little effort. I could go in and pull their IDs, so I could literally steal anybody's identity at will. And there's nothing stopping me from doing that. It's crazy how open these systems are within banks. Obviously, they're closed systems, right? But anybody, literally anybody at the bank can see this information. It's crazy to me that how kind of lax that privacy is at a lot of banks.
Well, that's quite a distressing case study.
At least it's in America.
It's very.
You don't have too much to worry about, Nick.
It has real parallels with actually the way that health data is managed in the US, in particular mental health data. So there are these open sharing protocols for healthcare data that enable doctors in the US to be compliant with HIPAA while also maximizing care coordination. And so if you're a member of one of these open standards, then you can, and you share a patient with another doctor, you can access their health records. Now that protocol is turned off for mental health care in 99% of the clinics. Don't quote me on the figure, but it's a big number. And the interesting thing there is, we know that on the one hand, health data breaches in the US have taken on pretty worrying momentum in the last 10 years. And on the other hand, we know that mental health care coordination is an enormous problem. To treat a friend of ours who's a professor of neuroscience at NYU, was getting some treatment for a family member, and it required coordinating with 5 different care providers. And he had to sign 25 different consent forms in order for those 5 care providers to coordinate care between each other, because they each sat in different institutions, and HIPAA limited them from sharing data smoothly without the consent of the patient. So, it's not just about the risk that holding too much data causes in terms of a breach. It's about how the mechanisms that we have for sharing that data securely can limit or potentially enable a better customer experience, or in that case, a better health outcome.
Yeah, the protection is good. It's just the mechanisms in place to do that are very inefficient. And I think kind of to add something to kind of Tim's point there about the, I don't even remember what it was now. I don't want to say the efficacy of things, but like, I agree. I don't think that it's an SSI ecosystem's role to police how companies store data. I thought when Charles spoke at the congressional thing back in June, I thought he actually had a really interesting approach to doing it, which is taking a principled approach, is build the technology and offer the technology in a way that is privacy forward, right? Or privacy by design, if we want to use the SSI terminology, and make it robust in that way. But you can't prevent people from doing bad things. And that's where the regulations step in, like GDPR. Like, you can't do everything from a technology standpoint. There's always going to be bad actors. And that's where the regulation is going to step in, kind of like a doctor and malpractice insurance and all that kind of stuff, right? If they do something stupid, leave a watch on somebody, whatever. Like, that's what that stuff is for. Like, there has to be protections in place. I know that's a silly example, but it's true. But that's kind of what it's for. It's like, you can only go so far with the tech and making it secure and making it private. There will be things in place that will have to protect the consumer, and that's the kind of angle that regulators should take, not necessarily so much on the tech, but what are we trying to protect? That's kind of the balance that I thought was really interesting that he talked about during those hearings. So yeah.
Absolutely, I agree, and I love the question, what is it that we're actually trying to protect? Because
yeah,
that kind of gets to the root of it.
Exactly, because there's only so much you can do. SSI solves a lot of problems, but it doesn't solve many of them.
Yeah.
So it gets tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pete. So to the hardcore here, I know that we're already we're 20 minutes past our, or 10 minutes past our allotted time. I'm really happy to stay on and continue chatting, but if don't feel like you need to, if you need to drop off and do other things.
I will drop off, but congratulate you again on a great release, great presentation, great turnout. Well done.
Congrats.
I'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Bye.
I'll head out too. Appreciate it, guys. Congrats.
Appreciate you being.
Thanks very much, everybody, to all the team. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, looks like we're winding up. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, have a nice evening. Bye.
Thanks, Marcus.